Welcome to my unfiltered, fairly detailed Dexcom Stelo review. I tested Dexcom's new biosensor, the Dexcom Stelo, for 30 days to get an idea of how I like it and, of course, what I think could be better. Overall, I like Stelo. Do I think it's more mind-blowing than other glucose sensors I've worn? No. But do I think it could be a great option for some? Absolutely. And in this video, I'll be sharing my unfiltered opinion, as well as the user experience from my friend Michelle, who also tried the Dexcom Stelo. Stelo was Michelle's first time using continuous glucose monitor technology, also known as a CGM, and I wanted to include her perspective as someone who's using a sensor for the first time. From a 200 feet perspective, I think the main three pros and cons of the Dexcom Stelo are, well, the pros are access. It's easy to get. You get a really comprehensive blood sugar overview, way better than just finger sticks. And I really like the accuracy, whereas some of the cons are the affordability. It requires some analysis from the user, and the customer service is not amazing. So I'll cover those pros and cons in detail, and we'll also talk about the nuts and bolts of the Dexcom Stelo. Talk a little bit about how it compares to other biosensors available, and the future of CGMs. I'm Christelle from Diabetes Strong, and I've been living with type 1 diabetes since 1997, and I've been using a Dexcom CGM since around 2015. Dexcom Stelo is intended for people who live with type 2 diabetes, who's 18 years and up, and who do not use insulin. That's not me. I don't fit that criteria. So what I'll do in this video is I'll put myself in the shoes of someone who do not take insulin and give you my opinion on whether or not it's worth your money, because it's not exactly free. Just to make sure that we're all on the same page, there's probably a few things that you need to know in order to completely understand the purpose as well as the power of biosensors and CGMs. You wear a transmitter on the body, and it has a small sensor attached that sits underneath the skin, and that sends your blood sugars 24/7 to the Dexcom Stelo app. You have to be within 20 feet of your phone to get readings. It does not measure your blood sugar in your blood, but in the fluid underneath your skin. And this is why if you do a manual test to a finger stick, this won't always match the Dexcom Stelo reading, but it can still be considered accurate. I'll talk a bit more about accuracy later on in this video. Now that we know how a biosensor works, let's have a closer look at Stelo. This is a sensor that sits on the skin. You can see the tape here around, and this is a hard plastic. And this is a little soft sensor that sits underneath the skin. You might have seen other sensors before, maybe in the wild, or you tried others, but here we have a close-up of what Stelo looks like compared to other CGMs that I've tried. This is Stelo. It's the exact same size and form as the Dexcom T7, which is the sensor that I currently use. And Stelo is just gray. And here we have Dexcom G6, the Freestyle Libre 2, and the Freestyle Libre 3. So it's larger than Libre 3, but it's smaller than the other older sensors. You insert it by unscrewing the cap, lightly pressing the inserter against the back of the arm, and a needle will quickly insert the sensor underneath the skin. The needle does not stay in your arm, but retracts back into the inserter and only leaves behind a small, thin sensor. Here you can see the sensor up close. The sensor lasts 15 days and 12 hours, and when it expires, you'll be notified in the Stelo app. And you can just peel off the sensor, kind of like a Band-Aid, and you can see it pulls out the sensor as well. According to the Dexcom website, 20% of sensors may not last for the full 15 days, and 10% of the sensors may last less than 12 days. Just as with Dexcom T7, Dexcom wants you to add the overlay tape that comes in the pack to your Stelo to secure it so it won't fall off. I do not do that because this tape makes me break out in hives. Instead of using the official Dexcom tape, I use a tape from a company called Skin Grip. I like them. They're gentle on my skin and they keep the sensor in place. If you decide to get one, you can use code DiabetesStrong for 10% off. Dexcom Stelo is only FDA cleared for wear on the back of the arm, so that is where I placed it, well, mainly because I was doing this review. Usually I like to wear my Dexcoms on either my thigh or my stomach, but that is considered off-label use. I didn't think it hurt to insert the sensor, and I found the whole setup really easy. But I've also been doing this for a really long time, so let's also get another perspective.
I actually had the Dexcom for a while, maybe even a week, before I put it in because I was so scared of the pain that I was going to feel when I put it in. So finally, I worked up my nerve to actually do it, And I prepared my skin like I needed to prepare. And I had my husband actually take it, and I turned around and I closed my eyes and I braced for the pain and I was ready for it. And he put it up against my skin and clicked it in, and I didn't feel anything. So I felt kind of embarrassed that I had waited for that whole week to put it in, but it honestly did not even feel anything as it went in.
I'm so glad to hear that. It's a process, right?
Yeah.
And that's basically the nuts and bolts of the Dexcom Stelo. But let's talk about that first pro that I mentioned up front, which is accessibility. Stelo is an FDA cleared device, but the big difference between Stelo and the other CGMs that I showed you up front is that this is the first FDA cleared over-the-counter glucose sensor. This means that you do not need to see a doctor, you do not need a prescription to get your hands on one, and I think that's a huge upside. And that is also one of the differences between a biosensor and a CGM. A biosensor does not require a prescription, whereas a CGM does. You just open your browser and go to stelo.com and you order your sensor. But don't make the mistake that I did. First, create an account. I did not do that and I ran into an issue. I created my order, I submitted my payment. However, I didn't pay attention and my computer auto-populated an old address. I did not catch that until after the order had gone through, and unfortunately, without an account, there's nothing you can do. I reached out to Stelo support and they confirmed it's just too bad, nothing they can do. I'm fortunate though that I have a friend who still lives close to where I used to live and she ran over and got my package. Had she not, I would probably just have missed out on $99 of sensors. So I was lucky. And moral of the story is create an account, and if you do make a mistake, you can actually go in and make changes. And that leads me to the first con, and that is the price. This is expensive. I've seen others mention that relatively it's cheaper, and they're right. All CGMs are extremely expensive, but I find that an over-the-counter biosensor priced as Stelo is going to be unaffordable for a lot of people. I paid $99 and that was for 2 Stelo sensors. You can also do a subscription model, and then it comes down to $89 a month. And both of these prices are indeed relatively cheaper than most other CGMs. A month's worth of Dexcom G7 using a coupon, not using insurance, is around $170. So Dexcom Stelo is around 60% cheaper. So strictly from a budget perspective, if you compare the two, the Dexcom Stelo is going to be the more affordable option. However, if you compare it to finger sticks, then finger sticks are more affordable. It's really hard though to compare finger sticks to wearing a biosensor. So let's talk a little bit more about what you get out of wearing a biosensor like the Stelo. The biggest upside to Dexcom Stelo is that it allows you to see your blood sugars in real time 24/7, including, for example, when you're sleeping and cannot measure your blood sugars. However, the reason why I think Dexcom Stelo is just okay compared to other CGM options is the interface, so the app, and how it helps you learn your trends. You have to download the free Dexcom Stelo app to see your blood sugars in real time. Once downloaded, it will walk you through the basics of biosensors as well as how to insert it. If you're new to biosensors, I suggest that you read through all that material or that you watch my tutorial on how to get started with the Dexcom Stelo. You then insert the sensor and the warm-up period starts. There's a 30-minute warm-up period. Once you then start it in the app, you can follow along and see how much is left of the warm-up. You will not be receiving any blood sugar numbers during that first 30 minutes, but after that, you'll be able to see your blood sugar readings in the app. A 30-minute warm-up is pretty brilliant. Dexcom G7 was the first to introduce a 30-minute warm-up, whereas previous Dexcom versions had a 2-hour warm-up, and the Freestyle Libre is 60 minutes. With Dexcom Stelo, just as with Dexcom G7, this sensor updates every 5 minutes. However, with Dexcom Stelo, the app only updates every 15 minutes. Remember how I told you that biosensors and CGMs don't measure the blood sugars in the blood, but rather in the fluid underneath the skin? Well, those readings are about 10 minutes behind what's going on in the blood. When you then add the 15-minute app update, that means that the blood sugar reading that you're seeing on your screen could potentially be 25 minutes behind. Since Stelo is not intended for people who use insulin to manage their blood sugars, so there's no need to use the readings for calculating insulin doses or for catching potentially insulin-induced low blood sugars, it should be fine. But it's something to keep in mind if you're comparing your Dexcom Stelo reading to a finger stick. Given the delay, the two won't always match. It's okay. It does not mean that your Dexcom Stelo is inaccurate. It just means that your blood sugars that you're seeing on your screen are a little delayed. But what Dexcom Stelo can do is that it can give you trends. It can show you your blood sugar fluctuations and help you assess whether or not you need to make any lifestyle adjustments or maybe adjustments to your long-term medication needs. But it's not a product for people who need to make here and now blood sugar management decisions. A pretty cool Dexcom Stelo feature is the spike detection. The app will automatically catch any spikes in your blood sugars and it will notify you. You can turn that notification off if you don't want it, but it'll notify you of blood sugar spikes, which means that you can pretty easily zero in on where you potentially want to make changes.
It identifies if there's a spike, it'll say what happened here, and it'll tell you, will encourage you to log something at that point because something caused that spike. So I could click in, so yes, I did go in and I clicked on like what I ate so I could go back and remember.
The app will also send you an end of session notification after the 15 days, showing your average blood sugars and time in range. Time in range is an important value for us living with diabetes, and a lot of doctors now focus more on time in range than on A1C. Your time in range is a percentage that shows you how much of the time were your blood sugars within your blood sugar target range. You can set the target range in the Stelo app, and they recommend that people with diabetes choose the first one here and people without diabetes choose the tighter range. But what I don't love is that once the sensor is done, you have no information here in the app. It's a blank screen. And my guess is that most people don't know that they can download the Dexcom Clarity app or go to dexcomclarity.com and see their historic data. I went through all the training material for Dexcom Stelo and I did not see that highlighted anywhere. Did you ever open Dexcom Clarity? Did you know it was an option or did you use it?
Yeah. When I got the Stelo, I pulled out the directions and I unfolded the whole thing. The instructions are like the size of my body. Took a picture with me with the instructions. And I read them because, as you know, I was very nervous to put this in and make sure I was doing it right. So I read from start to finish. And honestly, I couldn't go back to see if maybe I missed this, but apparently there is an additional app called Clarity that you can use to actually track the, more of the history and the analytics and see like your blood glucose over time.
So have you logged into Dexcom Clarity yet, or?
Yes, I did actually try to go into Dexcom Clarity and I could not figure out how to connect it. So it wasn't as straightforward. So the Clarity was not as straightforward as the app, the Stelo app, to track. So, but I'm hoping to be able to still see
we'll figure it out.
Data.
Two other things worth noting is that the Dexcom Stelo app will only show you blood sugars from 70 up to 250 milligrams per deciliter. And it does not have any alerts. You can be alerted if you have a blood sugar spike, but not if you have a high or low blood sugar. Again, this kind of makes sense since the product is not meant for people who live with insulin-dependent diabetes, so there shouldn't be any danger of really low blood sugars. However, I do think we could have benefited from seeing a higher range than 250. So just to recap on this, I do think that Dexcom Stelo can offer a huge benefit in the sense that it can give you a more comprehensive view of your blood sugars, more than just a finger stick, because basically finger sticks are just, well, a bleep in time. But I do think it's a shame that it only updates every 15 minutes, that it doesn't go higher than 250, and that you can't see any of your historic blood sugar numbers in the app. And this takes me to the second major con of this system. If you really want value out of wearing a Dexcom Stelo, I think you have to diligently log all of your food and all your activity in the Dexcom Stelo app, and you have to do data analysis. You have to do data analysis, look at your historic numbers, and you have to do that in Clarity. You can, of course, do none of that. And you might get some insights, but overall, if you want to know what is impacting your blood sugars, why you're seeing those fluctuations, you have to take notes and you have to do analysis. And Clarity is great and it will do some of the analysis for you. I must admit, I did not log enough data when I was wearing the Dexcom Stelo. That was a big mistake. I think, again, some people will see patterns, but I hardly ever have significant enough patterns, so there's nothing to see here. But overall, I would have liked to see more hand-holding when it comes to analysis with the Dexcom Stelo. Yes, they do have a lot of reading material here in the app, but I feel like we as users are on our own, and since this is an over-the-counter product, we can't really expect our doctors to help us read the reports or even know how to. And even though the spike alerts are great, they don't show up in the Clarity reports, and neither do any of the notes you might have attached to that spike. So unless you manually go through the events in the app, they don't provide much value. And the third pro of the Dexcom Stelo is the accuracy. When it comes to accuracy for biosensors or CGMs, that is measured in something called MARD, M-A-R-D, and it stands for mean absolute relative difference, and the lower the better. To me, the accuracy seemed exactly like the Dexcom T7. I pulled in both the Dexcom T7 and the Dexcom Stelo blood sugar readings in my InPen. I was wearing both at the same time. So InPen is a smart insulin pen, and you can see here the readings are pretty much identical. But I was a little nervous about the accuracy towards the end of the sensor. My Dexcom T7s are only 10 days in the 12 hours, and they can sometimes be a little inaccurate towards the end. Dexcom Stelo is a 15-day sensor, plus that 12-hour grace period. But all good. Stelo performed extremely well, even towards the end of the sensor. You can see here, this sensor had less than 6 hours left of the grace period. Had it been inaccurate, there wouldn't be a whole lot I could do about it. So just like the Freestyle Libre, Dexcom Stelo does not allow for calibration. I did ask Dexcom COO Jake Leach about calibration when I interviewed him, and this is what he had to say.
I'd say we haven't, it's a great question. We haven't ruled it out, but it's not in the current feature set, but it's, we'll continue to evaluate it. The other thing is sensors continue to get better and better. The need for calibration, is less. I know it's a very important feature on G7. But as we look at it for some of the other sensors as we go, we'll continue to evaluate.
I did notice drop signal a few times, like this day where all of a sudden there's a chunk of blood sugar readings missing. I did not notice this until later, and I guess I wasn't checking my blood sugars at that time. And the final con, before we start talking a little bit about other biosensors available as well as the future of CGMs, is the lack of customer service. If you're having an issue with your Dexcom Stelo app or your sensor, all you can really do right now is go on the website, look under support, and see if you can find an answer to your question. You can also chat with a Stelo bot. But as of right now, I have not been able to find a direct phone number. I used the Stelo bot once when I ordered my Dexcom Stelo sensors to the wrong address. Yes, I know, that was totally my fault. I reached out to them and I heard back by email after about 24 hours. But for me at that point, it was already too late as the sensors had shipped out. Yes, it was that fast to get it shipped and delivered, just over 24 hours. This is the fastest I've ever received a sensor, and it's because Dexcom is collaborating with Amazon to fill the orders. But I can see it being really frustrating not being able to talk to a person if you're in a situation where your sensor is malfunctioning or you can't get it to work. To briefly conclude before we move on to talk about other available biosensors, I absolutely love how more people living with diabetes are getting easier access to glucose sensors. Being able to see your blood sugars in real time without having to do a lot of finger sticks can make a world of difference, and it can really enable you to make data-driven, meaningful changes to manage your diabetes. Is it better than other sensors available? No, I don't think so. And I do think it has some shortcomings, such as the lack of hand-holding when it comes to analysis. The price might be an issue for a lot of people, and the lack of customer support is really annoying. Would I buy a Dexcom Stelo again? Well, maybe. If my insurance decided to deny coverage for Dexcoms, I'll probably buy a Dexcom Stelo, and I'll buy that over other biosensors. And I'll tell you why. But first, I want to hear Michelle's overall experience. What was your overall experience wearing Dexcom Stelo? Did you have some major takeaways?
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the things that I guess I kind of knew, but I was able to see live through the app was most of the mornings I woke up with a blood glucose level of under 100, but there were certain days where I would be above 100, and I was trying to kind of think about what might have caused that. And those were kind of the mornings I woke up somewhat stressed about some things with clients or things I had to do. So I definitely realized that through using this app, how stress can affect the blood glucose levels. It was really interesting to see, just how much certain foods can affect your glucose levels. I mean, I do want to continue this journey. I really do find it very interesting to see what's going on, and
Cool. So you might buy it again, you won't buy it again?
I would buy it again. Yeah.
Thank you, Michelle. Michelle liked the Dexcom Stelo. I like the Dexcom Stelo. But there are also other options available, including the over-the-counter Freestyle Lingo Biosensor. I tried the Freestyle Lingo as well, and I think a choice between Lingo and Stelo, well, at least to me, isn't exactly clear-cut. Freestyle Lingo is not intended for people living with diabetes, and it's based on the Freestyle Libre 2 technology, so that's a big sensor. Freestyle Lingo does not focus on time and range. It will tell you your blood sugars, but the focus is on blood sugar spikes. You get assigned a Lingo count, which is the amount of blood sugar spikes that you're allowed in a day. And you can also do blood sugar related challenges. It's a kind of blood sugar gamification. Just like with Dexcom Stelo, you can lock your activity and your food directly in the Lingo app. And what I really liked is that that activity and that food then showed up directly on that blood sugar graph in the app. It made it really easy, really easy to quickly see the correlation between what you're doing, what you're eating, and your blood sugars. This is a very high level of what Lingo can do. But I think the biggest downside is that it's not meant for people like us. It's not meant for people living with diabetes. And that means that some people might get frustrated, I know I got a little frustrated at least, with being hammered over the head with the Lingo count. To some people, the size of the sensor could also be an issue. It is a very big sensor. It's very flat though. And when it sits on the back of the arm, I hardly noticed I was wearing it, and it really stuck to my skin. It's a 14-day sensor, and another upside is that 2 sensors is $89, and the sensor will update in the app every minute. I still haven't told you which one I would choose, and that's because I'm really torn. I find there to be upsides and downsides to both sensors. Ideally, if you can, I'd suggest that you try and buy a Stelo, buy a Lingo, try it out and see what works best for you. Okay, moving on. Someone also asked me what I think is the future of CGMs. I do think we're going to see more biosensors. I just think there is too much money to be made on people who do not live with diabetes and who are curious about their blood sugars. Do I think it will hurt us who live with diabetes? No. I actually think it'll benefit us. I think the more money that these companies are putting into biosensors, putting into CGM technology overall, the more investment they're making, the more benefit we're going to see as well. But this is of course just my guess. What do you think? And I know I just talked a little bit about Freestyle Libre Lingo. I might do a review on that later. I haven't really decided yet. If you're ready to get started with the Dexcom Stelo, check out this video where I'll give you a very hands-on guide on how to apply it and how to get it started. And while you do that, why not check out my YouTube membership? Subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications. That way you'll never miss a thing. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.